What I want to talk about is this extremely interesting place where we find ourselves, which is, I think, at the end of the beginning of the digital era. We have a price decline on the order of at least 4 orders of magnitude in the digital gear that we all work with. So the computer that we all carry around in our pockets is a supercomputer by the standards of just a generation or two ago and costs nothing compared to what computers used to cost. This is a really happy phenomenon. Again, nothing else behaves like this. This is really good news. As the price declines so quickly, our thirst for technology appears to be bottomless. The United States economy is, in 2008, more than 5.5 times as technology intensive as it was in 1995. I want to talk about how profoundly the world of innovation has shifted in just a few years. And to do that, I want to point out a passage from a book, which is a wonderful book. This book is called The New Division of Labor. It's about what people are good at. The division of labor was going to be between people and computers. And they tried to do this by example, to say, look, there are some things people are good at comparatively, and they're going to continue to be good at those things. So this has gone from an example of something that computers will never be able to do to something that has demonstrated to be done in 7 short years. And this car has driven without a single accident or an incident thousands of miles on American roads. I do think, however, just based on a couple days' experience, this is not ready for Indian roads, right? So a while back, IBM said, we need a challenge. We're going to build a supercomputer that plays Jeopardy. And we're going to get so good with it that we're going to let it play against the all-time best human Jeopardy players. And when they started, the computer was actually terrible, right? Any person could beat it, any of us could beat it. And as they got more and more intelligent about their algorithms and about how to tell a good answer from a bad answer, and as they put more and more documents underneath, the computer started getting better and better and better. Technology is driving this change in productivity. In other words, it's not just a correlation, it's a story of cause and effect. Computers have made our economy, and by extension, every other economy, much, much more productive, to the point that we're back on track with some of the happiest periods in our country's economic history. Sometimes technology, when you change nothing else, when you don't try to fix any of the other problems in a situation or a society, just when you improve the technology situation, things can get dramatically better. In Kerala, someone did this incredible research where he went to go look at what happened to the fishermen when they got their first mobile phones. First of all, the adoption of mobile phones was associated with a dramatic reduction in price dispersion. So the fact that you got paid so much more for the same fish than I did, that's bad news in economic terms. A complete, not a partial, a complete elimination of waste. Something that economists call the law of one price. If there's one fish, it should only have one price associated with it. They suddenly converge to that. So in other words, the behavior here for the first time started corresponding to economic theory, and then finally both the consumer and the producer, in other words, both the fisherman and the person who bought the fish, became better off. And by the best estimates that we have, every 10% increase in mobile phone penetration is associated with almost a 1% growth in GDP. This is not small level stuff. This is a huge improvement to society. So when I look back across this spectrum of things that we care about, whether you care about innovation or productivity or well-being in a society, kind of name it, the news here is just fantastic. The first one is the tension between, let's call it algorithms and intuition. But when we take a good hard look at what human intuition is, the magic kind of goes away in most cases, and what we're left with is the conclusion that human intuition is just good old-fashioned pattern matching ability. I'm here to tell you human intuition is a real phenomenon. The problem is that everything up here can be put into code and to put into silicon as well. And if we want accurate computer models and forecasts about the future, what are the conditions we need? We need an environment that's basically exactly the same. It has to give us data. The data can come from sensors like there are on Google cars. It has to be consistent, has to not be terribly complex. The Google car is not going to solve Indian roads in the next few months because that's just too complex an environment for right now. The people in charge of them need time to gather data and test their models. And here's one of the huge differences between people and computers. We humans require rapid feedback. Computers don't. So I think our intuition over time, our intuition is going to have a smaller and smaller market share in the world. And we're going to be turning more and more of our decisions and our predictions over to computers because that's what's going to give us the better answers. The next area where we sense a huge tension is between the idea of focus and attention and the idea of becoming easily distracted. We have developed an amazing new toolkit of distractions in the digital era. I grew up reading a book. When I was a kid, I always had my nose in a book. And I thought, come on, give us human beings more credit than that. Our brains are going to be able to handle these new digital tools. And then I looked at what I was actually doing kind of all day, every day at work, and I found myself getting trapped between checking out what I was, putting my Facebook updates and watching what my friends were doing, and I'll go put a Twitter update out there, and let's go see what's happening on Gmail. And I heard a great phrase about this. This is called the Bermuda Triangle of attention. I don't know about you, but I can convince myself that I'm actually being productive and getting work done, even when I'm caught in the middle of this Bermuda Triangle. So one of the tensions that I want to encourage us to be aware of is this friction between attention and concentration, and we need to develop the self-discipline in our lives and in our work to shut these things off and to try to find a space to be quiet and contemplative and focused for long periods of time. One of the other massive tensions that we see in today's world, facilitated by technology, is the tension between autonomy or self-direction and self-guiding, and then more precise and more tight control. A lot of us are probably following what was going on in the Middle East for a lot of 2011, where we see this strange, huge, popular uprising against the governments of that part of the world. And the more you look at it, the more you realize these things were deeply facilitated by social technologies. These were not just part of the story, these were a critically important part of what has happened in that part of the world. And then you realize that these same tools are actually the fantastic tools in the hands of people who would like to be oppressive and like to exercise more tight control. Here, I understand that the issues are quite different. The issue is keeping up with the growth that you're experiencing, but the tension between the parts of the world that are growing very quickly and the parts that are not is becoming a tough tension here. I recall that when our president came to your country late last year, he had to do a lot of explaining back home, back in the States, about how what's going on between my country and your country is actually good for both, and is creating jobs all around the world instead of destroying them. And I find it amazing that we have to keep reinforcing this notion. One of the oldest findings in economics, and one of the ones that's just everyone agrees that it's true, is that trade benefits both sides. Our computers are becoming so good that we need fewer people now and in the future. A lot of knowledge work jobs seem to be going away in America, partly because of offshoring, but more fundamentally because of things like the Google car and Google Translate and IBM Watson, where computers can now do things that we used to have human workers for. That trend is not going to stop. It doesn't look like it's slowing down. And what does that mean for the kinds of skills and jobs that we have in different economies? No one knows the answer to this right now. But I do know that I would really not want to be a relatively low-skilled knowledge worker in the developing world right now, in the developed world right now, because I think that there's an excellent chance that fairly soon you're not going to be able to find work at a wage that's acceptable to you because of the combination of basically the developing world and extremely powerful computers. So the tension between employment and displacement is a real tension now. That tension, I predict, is only going to get more acute over time, and this is the one area where I actually find myself least optimistic looking ahead, simply because of the incredible power that we've unleashed to do things that knowledge workers used to do. I want to end on a high note, though. I want to talk about this fundamental tension that I sense in the world and in the digital world these days between an optimistic outlook and a pessimistic outlook on where we are and where we're headed. As someone who studies technology and who studies the digital world, I actually find this astonishing, that people could look at the same world that I look at and be pessimistic. Because when I look at what's happened and what's coming, I find the overall just incredible grounds for optimism, and I think my optimism is grounded in history. I want to draw a couple fairly strange graphs here to make this point. I want to draw a graph of human history. And one way to think about human history is to just look at how many people there have been in the world throughout history. When you draw that graph, it's one of the weirdest looking graphs that you're ever going to see, because it's a story of nothing, nothing, nothing. Whoa, what happened there? And all of a sudden, forget that and the end is looking into the future. So just concentrate on that vertical cliff that happened there. Where for most of human history, prehistory, recorded history, whatever, there's kind of nothing going on. And then all of a sudden, this huge leap forward in worldwide population. This is a story of the Industrial Revolution. This is a story of us finally getting beyond the constraint of having to rely on human muscle power and animal muscle power. I don't think it's an overstatement to say that we are now at the point where we can do with mental work what the Industrial Revolution did with physical work. In other words, we have the same level of acceleration of our human capabilities, our human mental capabilities, that we had starting in the late 18th century when James Watt finally tinkered with the steam engine enough that we could get past having to rely on muscle power as well. What I don't think is going to happen is that we're suddenly going to merge our brains with computers inside 20 or 30 years. This is what the singularity crowd is trying to sell us. Don't buy it. I think that's just a fundamentally misguided interpretation of what's happening here. I think we have a phenomenal toolkit to help us address the great challenges we face as society and to improve the lot of people in my country, in your countries, and all around the world. I want to wind up with a quote that Warren Buffett, in his letter to the shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway earlier this year, I think absolutely got it right. He said, look around and you see a world beyond the dreams of any colonial citizen. Now, as in 1776, America's best days lie ahead. I couldn't agree more with that, and I would expand that out. The best days, the really optimistic days for the world lie ahead of us, not behind us.